81 of Just Joshing. My guest, Tim Radecki, Mike Dean, they are doing the Grave Brigade. So how are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Doing well.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having us. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Yeah, and as I said to you off the air, I'm causing all of the chaos and the mayhem
because someone's got to do it.
Well, it's my job. I'm a freelancer. You embrace the chaos of it.
That's right.
Yeah. Today, I told Mike before he came on the air, I had a meeting with a client that legitimately went nowhere, which kind of blew chunks. I feel like I wasted $10 basically is what I did today as far as that goes. And so, but I mean, on the plus side, I got comics today. So I mean, it's not all bad.
Hey, it's Wednesday. Yeah, there's something positive.
Yeah. So I realize you're working on your comics, so it might be in a slightly different way. But do you guys still read anything?
You know what? I've been catching up on comics from years ago. Now that they're in trade back, I dropped out with a lot of the pandemic stuff going on. I wasn't in the shops weekly anymore, so I'm playing catch up there. And then when I can, I back some of the other indie books on Kickstarter, kind of see what the other creators are doing. So that's what I've been reading a lot of now. So some really cool stuff going on out there. What about you? Are you picking up anything interesting lately?
Mike, do you want to answer that first? Do you want me to answer that back?
I have not been reading anything really recently. I'm trying to think of the last thing I picked up other than a couple of Hill House books in the past year. Anytime Joe Hill puts something out, I'm pretty eager to read that.
That's fair. Today I got Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. In my opinion, that's probably the best book on the market right now. Probably.
That's awesome.
I'm a Ninja Turtles nerd, and I've been reading the IDW run since it started way back in 2012, 2013, something like that. So I have the whole run of that. So that hasn't stopped. So that's a big one. And I always like checking out from a Kickstarter round. Right now, it's the carriers I'm collecting are Nightwolf. Ramotori's little universe of stuff is really, really good. As I told Mike off the air, I'm edited. I can't say the book's awesome because it's a conflict of interest, but it really is a good book. Roadkill Rampage #4, where Rodney Fikes. I edited that bad boy. So
wow, awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
I'm secretly a professional. Don't tell anybody.
That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, just curious, because I know when you create stuff, I gave up television. For me, the hobby I gave up was I'm not cool enough to watch TV anymore. I'll watch a show once in a while. I'll watch something I've been. I write a column for a publisher, and so now I'm getting caught up in pop culture a little bit. It's my job to watch some of this stuff. I'm not cool anymore. I've accepted this. I can't.
Sometimes you gotta put in the work, and you're like, okay, this isn't fun. I have to watch this for a job now, and it's a different dynamic.
It's a very different dynamic. It's I had to watch Stranger Things, and I was like, okay, I see why people like the show, but it's my job. What a weird thing to say.
Hey, there could be far worse jobs out there.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I'm not going to argue. It was just for a particular column, but it was just wow. When did this happen? I actually have to get paid to watch television. That is a strange dynamic. I never thought I actually could say, but it's true.
I look at all of the stuff I watch as part of my job in this weird way where it's just need to take in content, get inspiration, kind of also as a barometer for what we're writing sometimes.
Yeah. For me, that's video games. Video games is where I'm still. I had to make a choice. Do I watch television or do I play video games? I would rather play video games. I know that makes me still 12 at heart, but I'm very okay with it. I just find television boring now. When I'm doing it just for me, it just feels like I'm just sitting there. And I don't know about you. I get this itch that I need to do something.
Me too. Yeah, I've had a hard time watching TV in the last couple of years. I think, maybe it's just society in general. I think because there's so much immediate gratification and social media and that kind of thing has geared us towards these 10-second, 15-second clips of things. It's hard to dedicate 45 minutes or an hour to something where I feel I'm not being productive. I'm just sitting here watching this. So it really has to really grab me to really hook me to sit there. And hopefully watching with somebody else, I think helps too, because if I'm by myself, then I'm like, okay, I should be writing now, or I should be promoting this thing and getting out there, and I start getting in my head a little bit about it.
No, I feel like the pro tip I have to give to both of you is you do something while you watch TV. So like I either exercise or fold laundry or assemble furniture. That's my favorite to do because that takes like an hour to do most of the time.
Assemble furniture? Like, is there like a particular favorite there? I'm curious.
Anything from IKEA. I love assembling complicated IKEA furniture while I'm binging a show.
With no words or no descriptions for you. It's just pictures.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even look at the picture sometimes. I just see where it takes me. It doesn't always look like a table at the end, but so be it.
The table became a chair, but it's a comfy chair.
It's okay. It's because IKEA instructions they suck. It's like, and I
always have like 4 extra screws at the end, and I'm like, I hope these weren't weight-bearing screws. Somebody's gonna be in trouble later.
Well, it's like, I hope this wasn't important. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is. Right? So
find out the hard way.
Yeah, it is what it is. No, like I said, we all gotta do something. Like for me, I find the video game is the itch. Like for me, to scratch, because I can watch a story unfold and interact with it, which I kind of think is the big advantage to the video game. Whereas television, the only thing I still watch on television and any kind of regularity is pro wrestling. I don't know what that says about me exactly, but I think it's the live event kind of thing.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It's a little bit of the hybrid of sport and theater at the same time. Mm-hmm. So you're getting that dynamic at play, but you're active when you're watching it, where everything else, if it's a narrative, you're kind of passively watching it. And I think you can actively watch wrestling like you would like a sports game or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. I think that's the future of television, to be honest with you, because the way streaming works, I have a buddy upstairs. He's watching all of Chuck right now, right? This is one of his favorite shows, and I'm not going to knock him for his choice. It's actually a fun show, right? But he can binge that at any time. So why would he watch a regular show at a regular time, right? Back, I feel old saying this, but back in our day, but we would have to wait a week sometimes for a television show to come out. And maybe I think the anticipation is probably the big difference between then and now. Now there's almost no anticipation, right? Yeah. And kind of trying to bring that back a little bit, but I think the genie's out of the bottle in the stream world.
I'm not a fan of the anticipation. I like it for a whole season, but I've found that I can't watch stuff week to week anymore. It just it takes it out of me, especially with all the like slow playing of storylines. So the only way I can really binge something is if I get like a day off or something like that, or if I'm taking like a long flight, I'll download like 5 episodes and watch it on the way.
Yeah, well, that's a good time when you're on a plane, because it's like no one wants to be here, but we got it. This is how we do it, and yeah, no, it's fair. It's totally fair. So, you guys have been doing, like, Tim, I didn't meet you exactly, but you sent me a comic way back in the day.
Right? Yeah. I think we had just finished Superbud issue 3.
Yes, it was.
It was like the pandemic, and we weren't sure what we were going to do with it. We were basically just like finishing up lettering and all that kind of stuff when the pandemic hit. And we were like, well, what do we do? We've got this comic, and there's really nowhere to sell it right now. So we kind of held off. We were already pretty familiar with doing Kickstarters and that kind of thing, but it just felt like a weird time to launch and try to ask people for money when people were out of work and things like that. So we kind of put it on hold, but I was like, let me send it out to a couple of people. And I had read a couple of articles you had reviewed, a few other comics. And I was like, I think this guy Josh might, be interested in at least checking it out. So I sent it over in hopes that you would have checked it out. And it was really cool corresponding back and forth with you.
Yeah, off and on since. And no, like I said, and speaking of which, your next issue, I'm hoping to have that done tonight. So because you sent it to me, I've just been like, I moved over the last like couple weeks, so it's just been like,
no, that takes a lot of time out and energy out and all that kind of stuff. It's physically demanding, mentally demanding.
Yeah, this movie was a little weird. Like, this was one of those like weird little, like, I was living with a sketch lord more so than a landlord, and it got really bizarre at the end. It was just, I need to get out of here. Fortunately, I did. So,
wow, good good that you got out. You got a good spot now, but yeah, that's the worst. With landlords.
Yeah. Well, it's just the times we're living in. Where are you two gentlemen, if you don't mind my asking?
I'm in Philadelphia.
I'm in Jersey City.
Okay. How'd you two meet?
We went to college together, actually. Both studied film.
Both studied film? What like, so, okay, I always have to ask this. Comics do have like a storyboard quality that's similar to film. So that was what gravitated you both to comics, or were you just avid fans of the genre as well?
We were avid fans before we met. That was actually part of how we met. Was my roommate at the time, him and I would take trips to the comic book store every week. And one time he's like, hey, I invited Tim Radecki with us. And I was like, all right, as long as he's game to go and get milkshakes after, which was like a prerequisite for me. And we just all,
I was okay with the milkshakes.
And then we would all just sit around reading comics and drinking our milkshakes. And Tim and I started writing together shortly after that, starting with like sketch comedy. And then we just kept kind of like working on each other's stuff from there. And beautiful partnership grew.
Nice. So, okay, I got to ask both of you this, though, before we continue. Since you did go to college for film, so did you guys have film aspirations?
Yeah, still do. I mean, I work in film. That's my main career is like commercial producing or directing. I can't say that I think I saw myself as more of like a Kevin Smith or like, an auteur in college. And now I see myself as more of like a job for the most part. I still get to do creative projects here and there. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said though, too. Like, film and comics have like a nice overlap with like storytelling, and like especially now where it's like the way social media is, it's become even more essential to learn how to do like storytelling in condensed time frames. Like when we started writing Superbud, we thought we were going to just be able to write 36 issues and have an audience for it. And now we're like, how can we tell this story in 8 pages? How can we like really just like get the reader, give them a nice story, and get them on their way?
Yeah. And Tim, you like, was there like film or just?
Oh yeah, I met Mike at the time. We were both sort of trying to be the writer directors, kind of working on our own path. At that time, there were so many like these like niche audience kind of like super indie level movies coming out that were doing really well. I think we both kind of saw each other doing that individually. And then, like Mike said, we just kind of, on this side, we're writing sketch comedy. That was just kind of like a way to kill time on the weekends when we were all hanging out anyway. But I think we both saw ourselves as like serious writer-directors. And, I still would love to write more for film. It's just comics have got my attention right now. So everything I think of, I'm like thinking comics first instead of film first, which, 10 years ago might have been a little bit different. So yeah, at some point I'd love to get back into writing for film or, streaming or, something else like that with live action would be great. But yeah, like how Mike was saying too, I think there is that overlap with comics and film. A lot of the key things that we learned are the same in sequential storytelling. It's just with comics, it's telling it with still images and trying to capture like the perfect image to encapsulate that moment in time and putting those in sequence on a page. So there are big differences. I see a lot of people that maybe come from the film industry to just think like, okay, here's my script. I want this to be a comic. And it's like, well, they're two very different mediums. You really have to study the medium and learn how to write for that. And Mike and I kind of just jumped into it and just learned it by doing it, which like I would advise everybody to, to read about it, research it before you do that. But that was our path to learning. We just learned as we went. But I think, in the 10 or 12 years we've done it, we've learned a lot since then as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think the big difference between the two, honestly, is motion. Like you mentioned, is like that's really the big difference. And I interviewed Terry Moore. I remember way back when the show started.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, and he talked about his scripts. And one of the things I didn't realize until I actually looked at it was all his like frames are very similar. And what it creates is this density, this, even if sometimes a little artificial, but it does create a density in his work so that like, you notice when you read a Terry Moore comic, it does not feel like an 18-page comic. It feels more. It always does.
You're getting more out of it.
Yeah, you're getting way more. But this is why. It's how he scripted. He comes from the film industry, right? As well. His family's from there. So we were having it was one of my favorite early chats, actually, because it was just like I learned a very cool thing about comics just picking his brain for like an hour. Right, talking about his work, and it's like motion's the real big difference. In comics, the objective is to capture the perfect moment in time and the perfect feeling in that moment in time, and that can take a lifetime to do well. Right, there are some little things that you can steal from other people who have done it well.
Yeah.
Right, but what it comes right down to, it's like you got to figure out what you care about in those moments. And some like my favorite, I would say probably I said Once Upon a Time. Another really good book is Sega. Like it's still rolling its way around.
Yeah, great.
Right, it's a great book. But the reason it's such a great book is because it does such a wonderful job of you get invested in all the characters. And Brian K. Vaughan is an asshole when he kills them. Because it comes out of out of nowhere, right? But he makes you care, and those little moments that those little connections that those characters make with themselves and as such with the reader. That's why we love comics so much, because comics do that in a way almost nothing else can do it.
Yeah, it's truly a unique medium, and like you were saying, there's that freeze frame. You capture that moment in time, but it's also the way that you can layer that image with the next image with the next image. And it's the story that's being told in between those panels that really can grip you. That's how you're really telling the story, is how you're taking these frozen moments and putting them together. And in that sequence, what is the story that's being told there? And, can you picture it in your mind's eye, and you're filling in the gaps in between those things and what happens. And that also comes to like working with a great collaborator. Like Mike and I are both the writers, and we can imagine it a certain way, but we really won't see what it's like until we send it to an artist. We could put as many words on a page as we could, but really it's up to that artist to bring that to life. And that's why it's a collaboration and a partnership. Is oftentimes they see something totally different than you see, and you get the page back and you're like, wow, that's not exactly what I saw, but it's better than what I saw.
Almost always.
Almost always. You're right. Yeah. And that's why, the more that we write, I think we've also learned to know when to lean in and give a lot of description, and know when to pull back and leave it into that artist's hands, because you do get something that's often better than what you could imagine. Because that they've trained for that, they've put in their 10,000 hours or whatever it is in that specific form. So why not let them do what they do best?
And also going one step further, it also depends on the strengths of the artist as well, right? Let's say, for example, I'm going to simplify this because this is way more complex than that. Let's say you have an artist that's fantastic at action scenes, right? Do you really describe the fight in perfect detail? Probably not. They do their thing. On the same token, maybe that artist though maybe struggles. Maybe the script calls for a very specific kind of shot somewhere in there. Well, that's maybe when you get a little bit more descriptive, because it's a necessary part of the story. I think that's what I've learned is if it's necessary, you talk about it. If it's not, you shut up.
Yeah. And that's where, if you look back at the history of comics, you can really see some great things with the writer collaborating with an artist for 100 issues or something like that. Like right now, I feel like the at least on the indie market where we're looking at comics a lot, it's these team ups that, aside from Brubaker Phillips, those guys are kind of constantly work together. It's typically people doing like 5-6 issue arcs, and then they're done. They did their miniseries and they move on to the next collaboration. But if you see somebody work together for 100 issues, you can see that the way they gel together, and they've picked up that shorthand to communicate with each other, and it really clicks into another gear, which is really interesting.
Another good example of that is someone like there's some really good collaboration. You mentioned Phillips and Brubaker, Gaiman and Colleen Duran. They have a similar vibe. I mentioned Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Now they've been working for like 60 issues at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that's going on for that many issues.
Yeah. So I mean, that's just it. Like there are examples of it in the modern era. I think what Kickstarter has done, I think the great thing about Kickstarter is it's made it possible for everybody to tell their story.
Absolutely.
But the flip side, and this maybe this, I don't necessarily think it's a downfall. I just think it's just where the industry is right now. Is I don't think you tell those big long stories on Kickstarter. I don't think you can do that very easily.
It's definitely difficult, right? But I think, also years ago, and I wasn't in the industry to know for sure, but the way it seems was people give you a little bit more of a leash in a way to say, okay, we'll give you to 12 issues to get this off the ground, where now it's like, okay, issue 2 doesn't look so good. Issue 3 better be good, or we're pulling it quickly. I think because there's just not as much money in the industry right now. So the purse strings are a little tight, or whatever they would say. So that makes it difficult too.
Well, I think this is maybe my big thought of the day. I've said this before, like publishing has decentralized. I'm not just in comics, but across the board.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Right? Across the board. What that means is that there is now a constant fight to keep the big companies that are still around are in a constant fight to keep the audiences they have. So that they don't want to take as many chances because they know they have a tenuous hold on this audience as is. Right? Yeah. Their formula still works, but not in the way it did before. So that's the thing. So there, you'll see this even in public, like novel series. Sometimes you'll see like these big epic series get cut short, and then there's some where it's like, listen, we really love this series. Can you go forever?
That's right? The worst. You're like, oh, I thought I was getting an ending here.
Well, yeah, but that's the nature of, I think, of entertainment, right? If you have a hit, let's say you get a hit, right? It's hard to walk away from a sure thing, right? Because they don't exist. I mean, I can go to the last television show, Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Right? You could kind of tell at the very end nobody wanted to be there.
Yeah.
But the money train was kind of too good. So it was just like, we don't want to be here, but they're paying us stupid money. So we'll do it. And they did it. And they're like, please don't make us come back.
They made sure they didn't. With that
ending. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. But then that might be the whole secret to the last season. It's like, we just don't want to come back some more. But it's one of those things like we're in a weird place in terms of the industry, because I think the money is there still. I just think what's happened is the money now isn't just in this one giant pot anymore. The money goes here, the money goes there. It's a completely diverse market, right? I think everything has kind of developed its own niche. That might be just me, being on something. But I think I'm actually onto something.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think everything does have its own niche, and that audience that was really only buying in a comic shop is being split up with Kickstarter or just like webtoons now, and other digital platforms. I know Comixology's had its issues lately, but like Comixology was taking a chunk of that audience, and I think it's just diversified. There are all these like little niches out there, which is cool because you get different stories that way. It's not really just the big two anymore. You can get really cool, interesting comics. I think it's kind of like Mike was saying, like we were both huge lifelong comics fans, but that's definitely what got us back into to comics like in that college age, was like, oh, there's interesting stories here that aren't just your Marvel and DC superheroes or like the Image like anti-heroes that were going on in the 90s. Like, oh, there's more interesting things going on.
Yeah.
So it's great.
I remember Dark Horse and IDW being the big ones that stood out to me when I discovered Image as well. But I think I had like known about Image and just hadn't like clicked with any of their titles until probably even a little bit after college.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense because Image has like two identities. There's the when the artist escaped Image era.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the post-comic bankruptcy era, where I think Image is in a very nice space. Their competition right now to me is Dark Horse and Boom.
Yeah, Boom is kind of
Boom is great,
quickly, right?
Yeah, no, Boom has some really neat stuff. Like they really, really do. I I enjoyed Berserker by Matt Kint's probably my favorite writer in comics right now.
Yeah, really great writer.
Right, and he's killed it wherever he's gone. I enjoyed his Ninja K run. I enjoyed his Department H from Dark Horse. Like he's just really good, and he's at Boom right now doing all kinds of cool stuff. So I mean, and again, Once Upon a Time at the End of the World is also a Boom book, and it's my favorite book right now on the shelf.
I got to get that. Yeah.
Yeah,
heard good things. I listened to Jason on a podcast talking about it. I was like, oh, it sounds like a really good one.
Oh, it's a beautiful love story. It's a beautiful love story, at least so far. It's kind of going to the 60s orgy rock and roll fest right now, the current arc, but it also makes sense because this is okay, you fall in love and you've done all these wonderful things. Now what do you do? And then you meet people in the apocalypse here and there that are still alive and you're young and you don't, and that's kind of where they're at in the story. But it's been really good, and Jason's having a blast. You can tell he is, and it's a good run. And like I said, Boom has some really neat stuff. IDW, I mean, it's the licensed property thing. I'm 12, and Ninja Turtles is like my jam, and I admit it. I have a problem, but it's okay. But that's
like what you like. There's no shame in that.
No, God no.
Did you check out any of the Saturday morning adventures?
Are you talking like Darkwing Duck and Gargoyles?
No, they did a Ninja Turtles one. Tim Laddie, who did Superbud, was the artist.
Oh, really? I did not know that. Yeah. No, I didn't. I just kept with the so the turtle stuff I got was the mainline stuff and the Last Ronin universe. I didn't get because. Here's the problem. Like I call it the X-Men syndrome. Like I said, you have a really successful property, you do it to death a little bit. The one good thing about the pandemic, and this is I'm not from a Ninja Turtle standpoint, was there was just Last Ronin on top of the Ninja Turtles mainline, and that was it. Right now, there's like a giant like resurgence of books from all these things. Like it's like. All the books I would have gotten in 2021, 2022 are seem now to be coming out. So I'm missing some. So I didn't get the Saturday morning one. I'm afraid, but now I kind of want to. I have to go.
It's fun.
Definitely check it out.
Yeah. It's a different vibe, but it reminds me of the old cartoon. I forget the writer, but like the two of them, they put in a lot of like little Easter eggs of like old school, like the toys that were out at the time, and like these characters that would pop up in the TV show that really haven't gotten much play in like the comics or the movies ever. Like all these random characters they would put in there. So it's a lot of fun for that kind of stuff in a nostalgia kind of way.
I'll have to check it out now. You realize I've already got a huge Ninja Turtles.
I know. Just pushing it on you now.
That's right. He's my artist, man. Go check it out.
That was my.
Tim's gonna send you the first one for free. And then you gotta pay for the rest.
Yes, just give me a gateway drug. That's
exactly what that tactic is.
Yes, that is exactly what the tactic is. It's a good tactic. I use it myself. But like I said, there's just it just seems like today, and this is where the market is it's almost like these big gatekeeping systems have broken down, and that's probably a good thing. But at the same time, now it's like, okay, how do we build our audiences from here?
That's the problem. That's where I think where all of us are at is, okay, the gates are down. We're all in it, but how do you stand out amongst the crowd, and how do you build that audience?
And the answer
I think it's slow going.
Well, the answer to that is actually to go outside the normal gates. The gate's closed, right? So, just real quick, what's Grave Brigade about? Just tell the audience. We're going to do this again at the end of the show, but I have a thought process here. So let's just
go ahead, Tim.
All right. So Grave Brigade is about a team of World War II soldiers fighting monsters. So it's set in Europe during World War II, and they're like the baddest of the bad. They're all recruited from mental asylums, prisons, firing squads. So they serve no more purpose but for killing. So this is all, it's like a suicide mission for them. They're out there hunting monsters created by the Nazis, who are working with the occult and these mad scientists to create monsters.
So it's kind of fun. So like this would be like an example I would tell you. Have you guys looked at stuff like World War II museums?
No.
Why not?
That's a good point.
Like that's like the thing is today, and this is what I would tell any creative wherever you like, whatever it is, like you look at what your story's about, really about, all right? If you're talking about World War II, about there are World War II enthusiasts somewhere. How do I find them? Monsters. What kind of monsters? Like
old school black and white classic, Universal Studios style monsters.
So film noir, like the old black and white films kind of stuff. So again, how about hitting those guys up, right? Because we are all the one thing about the human race, we're all obsessed with shit. We all are, right?
Yeah.
And you have two really like I wouldn't say necessarily popular, but there's definitely a following to both. Like some people will go into World War II because of their family connections to that. Some people go into like like love just the classic horror monsters just because they're just fun, right? Frankenstein, Dracula, all that stuff, right? But those are particular groups of people. So I'm like, if I were looking to publish my work, where would I look to do it? And the answer to me would be, well, how about I'm doing a novel about like a night witch killing evil versions of the Knights of the Round.
Oh,
So yeah, it's really that's the simple elevator pitch.
Yeah,
it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the basic elevator pitch. And but again, it's about Night Witch. Night Witches are a very famous Russian group of Russian women that basically, Russia's best military force for the most part during World War II. So World War II museums, but specifically even women's rights groups. What a better example for like women empowerment and then you can find and like these women that stood up to legitimately stood up to the Nazis, right? So, but I'm thinking in those terms because if I'm going to go after the audience everybody else is going after, as you said, the hard part is how do you stand out? How do you stand out in a crowd?
Yeah.
You shouldn't go to the places nobody is looking at because there's tons of them. I made X. Who else likes X? Right? I don't know. That just might be my thought.
Yeah, the one benefit to kind of getting into horror for us, one is totally different than Superbud, which is nice to, if we are at a comic convention, we've got two things on our table that are totally different. They'll pull from different demographics, but there's so many like niche, there's a niche audience for horror in itself, and like kind of what we're doing, which is like the classic monsters. There's a lot of love for that, so we can go to like horror conventions and those kind of things to break out of the normal comic box, kind of like what you're saying, trying to pull from a different demographic there, pull in a new audience, and hit like a niche audience at a comic. In a horror convention instead of just like focusing on the comic convention or the comic sales, and that's something where like if you're at a place where they're selling memorabilia or photo ops and they're $100 plus. Our $5 or $10 comic is actually a pretty good deal compared to that. So you can come away with something physical that you're like, okay, I remember going to this convention with this physical thing, and it's a relatively low tier compared to some of the other things, or
Absolutely.
even like handmade art or things like that.
Absolutely right. This is like that's the thing today is I think where creatives are gonna. Like I'm not trying to doom and gloom. There's going to come a point like even Kickstarter is a lot more competitive today than it was just even a couple of years ago, right? So you always have to, I think, as a creative, but also just as a business, look at who might want to buy this thing, and how can we appeal to it in a way that will appeal to them.
Yeah.
Just my thoughts.
No, that's a good point.
No, I think it's true. I just think it's in general like the way that people find content now is diversified, and like a lot of people find through social media, but I feel like it's also just like common interests that outlie. Like I bring that kind of thing up all the time because in some of my circles of friends, I'm the only one who reads a comic book, and so like. We're talking about something like, well, have you ever read this? There's actually like a whole comic book that sort of explores this idea you just brought up. And they're like, no. And then all of a sudden they're interested.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up too, is if you can find a champion for your book or your art, that somebody that really loves it, then they can help spread that word, and word of mouth is something that's way better than any ad you're going to get on social media. Somebody that you trust and believe in telling you, check this thing out, I think you'll appreciate it.
No, absolutely. No, they call that super fans, right? You get enough of them, you become the next big thing. That's just how it goes. But you got to create that passion for it. So it sounds to me like both of you, I might be crazy assuming this with this. It sounds to me like this particular concept does go back to your college days a little bit, in the sense that this is also a bit of it sounds like a love letter to the old school horror films a little bit too.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the old school horror films, the old World War II movies, and then also like the old comics that like weren't necessarily part of our history or things that we read as kids, but like something we've grown to appreciate. Before I'd say like that boom of the silver age of comics that really made it's superheroes only. There were so many romance comics, comedies, and the other options were horror and war comics. They've kind of faded, and I think like we've seen a big resurgence in horror comics in the last 10 years, which is really awesome. There's a whole different way to tell a horror story than what we're used to in TV and especially film. Kind of do it in a sequence on a page is totally different, and like you can't rely on a jump scare and things like that. It's a unique medium. So it's really cool to see that. So in a lot of ways, it's also like a little bit of a love letter to just a throwback comic as well. And we do it in a modern way. Our comic feels modern, but I think that there's still that love letter to that sort of thing. We wanted to kind of give you that pulp feel of those old comics, but in a modern storytelling way.
Feel the same way there, Mike?
I completely agree. I mean, I also feel like we try to always kind of give ourselves those reality checks along the way with projects, because sometimes we have an idea and we want to run with like an homage or something that's playing off of, a previous concept that we want to like honor. And then we have to also remind ourselves like, well, is this just interesting to us as writers, or is this going to be interesting to the reader as well? And one of the things that changed over time as we were writing Grave Brigade and creating it was initially we were like very steadfast about doing it all black and white because we wanted it to feel like an old school comic. And then as we started like playing with the colors, we actually like, you know what, we can find the color tones and find the right colorist who's going to still make this feel like an homage without it having to be like the same quality that those older comics were.
No, I think, no, you got to make it your own, right? You got to make it your own. But I mean, yeah, it's cool to have a little bit of a love letter. I mean, the language of telling a horror story in some ways hasn't changed at all. It's about what you don't, I think it's about what you don't see that scares you a lot more. But
I feel that way too.
Yeah. But at the same time, like you can have fun with it. Like the old, like my favorite, probably some of the best comics from that era were the EC comics. Like it's the old
That's exactly
school.
what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, everybody like looks back at those fondly because they are terrifying reads sometimes. Right? They're terrifying reads, but they were so ahead of their time. And it's a shame that the Comics Code did them in, because I think even today, like I look at a horror story, like a lot of people think Stephen King is horror. I think Joe Hill is actually a little bit better at the horror aspect than his dad is. But at the same time, it's only one voice in that genre these days that people know about. There's a lot of people that do fantastic horror out there. And I feel like horror is only now starting to kind of get a little bit of that comeback. I could see us going on a horror trip again sometime in the next couple of years.
Yeah, definitely.
James Tynion doing his books. I think that's brought like a lot of like more mainstream audience to it. And then like if you look through it, like everybody's got all the main writers that are out there. The big writers are doing at least one horror book, which is pretty cool. It wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago. No,
10 years ago, you might have had Peter Milligan and Jeff Lemire, and that's it. I'm not saying about it. No knock. They both did good work, but it was a much smaller.
Yeah,
it was a much smaller space, and I think as I get farther away from the pandemic, we'll go back to, I think, a little bit more of a horror theme as time goes on. I think.
Yeah.
I think the threat of imminent death hasn't quite subsided from people's psyche completely yet, but it's disappearing, and that's a good thing. But now everybody will be like, okay, we need like something to scare us again.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's always going to stay with people that live through it. The way, people from previous generations would talk about the bomb scares and hiding under their desks in the 1950s, like that caused trauma that those adults now can still talk about. I think people that live through the pandemic will still have some of that fear built into them. And that will be interesting to see how creatives in the arts can tap into that.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm gonna be one of those abnormalities. It didn't. I went to the other way. It actually made me bolder.
Yeah.
Life's too short, man. You gotta, you like, we're not like, I think the one thing about this is we're not here forever. We're just not. So why play it safe? Right? Like you have to embrace those things inside you that really, really push you and make you who you are. You got to go for them because there's no guarantee you're going to be here tomorrow.
That's true.
Yeah. I think that was a reality check for a lot of people too.
Yeah.
And some people I know were like, I'm changing my career. I don't want to do this job that is building on an idea that I'm going to be here for 40 years and I might not be. And other people I know who like just shifted into less stressful jobs or something like that.
Yeah.
They want to spend more time with their family. They didn't want to like eat up that time at a workplace.
Put everything in perspective in a way for people.
Yeah.
That perspective, could shift your mindset in any direction. But yeah, I think everybody had time to actually stop and think about things for a little bit and go, okay, what is important? And you can prioritize and make decisions going forward.
Yeah. And I think, going back to the whole like diversified thing, I think what's happened is it's made all of us kind of go, like, it's made our world smaller in one sense. Because it's like, okay, what's important to me? And there's a group of people we connect to for sure, but by and large, it's a much smaller group, I think, than when the pandemic began. Again, I'm not sure it's entirely. I don't know necessarily it's a good or a bad thing. I think that's just where we're at right now. Is the people we let in our communities, I think, is a lot more selective than it may have been prior to the pandemic.
That's true. Yeah.
Some deep thoughts here as we get to the second half of the podcast.
Yeah.
We get this deep.
Well, hey, why not, right? We go anywhere and everything. So, okay, I'm going to ask a fun question, and then we'll get towards the end of this bad boy and wrap this up. Or you start get towards the end at least. Okay, this was obviously great. Grave Brigade is a love letter to films. I got to ask, what was your favorite films from those eras, or even if you just grew to appreciate them in writing this?
Well, I can just say that growing up for me, one of my favorite movies was not strictly, it was not a horror film, but it was an homage to horror films using those actors. And it was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, featuring Dracula and the Wolfman. And to this day, I can put that on and I just am loving it nonstop. But I remember as a kid being like so scared of Dracula with the like cape like this, and so scared of the Wolfman as he would change, and Frankenstein, and like it all just it definitely like stuck with me since childhood. And then I loved all those creatures as like they evolved into like the more modern versions of themselves.
Yeah, I think the black and white really adds to like the horror of that too, especially as a kid and you're watching everything else. 'Cause it's just, I don't know, it lent a little bit of authenticity to it in a way, maybe because you're like, oh, this looks old, and yeah, definitely really creepy. I loved all those Universal movies though, and then on like the war side, I think like the first thing I pitched to Mike was like, oh, do you remember the movie The Dirty Dozen? And that was kind of like the spark for the idea of like, okay, these guys are not going to be like good heroic soldiers. They're going to be like the worst of the worst. And then it's fun to kill them off in a way. So you can watch these guys. We'll set them up like that, and then you can watch them, kill a bunch of monsters and then get killed themselves. So that was another like old school movie that I think like really influenced this. And then we were working on the script for this in the pandemic, and I remember one night I was kind of stuck on issue 3 and sending it back and forth with Mike, kind of go like, I don't know what's going on with this. And then because there was nothing new coming out, one of the channels, and it was ABC or CBS, one of them put on Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's like a movie like I've seen 100 times. Mike's probably seen it 100 times, but I sat there and watched it in its entirety because there was nothing else going on. And then because it was like network TV, during the commercial breaks, I would work on the script. So I felt like that's another thing that really influenced the storytelling of Grave Brigade. This idea of like, obviously the antagonists being Nazis and punching Nazis is certainly a big part of it, but the globe-trotting aspect of it, the adventure of it, and before that I was looking at it from like this darker horror aspect, and I was like, oh, there's another adventure aspect of this too, and a lot of like the mythology behind what they were doing, and like that sort of mythicism kind of builds into it as well.
And the like race to get those MacGuffin type of items, where it's like both sides, neither one of them necessarily has it yet, but there's always this like constant like, well, we have to get there before they get to it.
Okay. Well, I actually was gonna, based on what you were kind of saying, like I'm always a big fan of like the Indiana Jones, the Cowboy Bebops, that Star Wars, the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of stuff, because they're just, you kind of know their adventures going into it. Just the whole tone of it just gives it away, so you can have fun with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
And that's why those kind of movies, like those kind of movies and stories, always do well. It's like, going in, Star Wars commentary aside, because it really depends on which trilogy you like, right? You're gonna have a good time. And it kind of takes the tension away in a fun way. It's like, okay, they're gonna kind of make it through the end. But I think that's also where you can actually surprise readers too, because like, no, not necessarily. They're not gonna necessarily make it, but it'll be fun.
Yeah.
But not everybody makes it to the other side in the end.
Yeah.
I think
there's also. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think that's definitely like the mentality for it, like that sense of adventure, and it'll change issue to issue too. Issue 2 is very much horror based, where issue 3 I think is a lot more of that like action adventure, a little swashbuckling kind of vibe. Definitely a little bit more Indiana Jones. So it'll be fun for us as the writer to kind of go issue to issue and change it up a little bit, and ultimately, I think the audience knows they're going to get some action, some horror, and some adventure when you pick up one of these issues.
Yeah. And did you take all the words out of your mouth there, Mike?
More or less, yeah. I was just going to say, part of it is just like the energy we try to bring to the issues and to the story. And so, like, I can't say that every character who dies or every character is going to live, or the ones who die are not, that they get like really their screen time the way it does in an adventure. I feel like in most adventure stories, if someone dies, it's not like, okay, keep going. It's like they get their moment, and that's not necessarily true in ours. But I still feel like the energy is there of like, this is a team, this is a unified sort of a unified goal that everyone's working towards throughout the story.
Okay, so I got a couple more, and we'll wrap this bad boy up. Well, you mentioned that like you talked about the monsters. I have a theory. This is like a crazy storytelling theory. I think that like young adult and horror are actually neighbors, right? Because I think because you can very easily take something very monstrous, depending on the audience you're reading. You can make it feel like an adventure, right? Or you can make it feel like it's truly terrifying. And I think in like, and I'm not saying your book's a kid's book, but where I'm going with this is, I I think one of the biggest surprises I think you find when you deal with these monstrous concepts is they're surprisingly flexible where you put them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So, okay, without spoiling too much, what is your favorite scene? What has been your favorite scene to see play out so far? I'm not going to talk about your favorite scene you've ever written because that could still be in the future, and I don't want you to spoil that. But from what has played out to the audience, what's been your favorite payoff so far?
Tim, if you want to take a first stab, go ahead.
Oh man, that's such a good question. I was really trying to buy some time to think about.
All right, I'll go.
There you go.
and it's like the only reason I asked you to go first is because I feel like it almost feels like a cop out, but it's like the first 2 pages of the first issue. We wrote that later on when we were doing edits, and it's such a like concise glimpse of what the story is, and it's the main character Graves coming face to face with the Grim Reaper on a battlefield where he's the only survivor. And there was something about that like, as much as like I liked it when we wrote it, seeing it on the page was a million times better. And just like, I got like goosebumps when I saw it.
Yeah, perfect way to encapsulate what the story is. Like, okay, here's our soldier. Here's this not demonic, but here's this otherworldly thing that he's coming face to face with, and the language that he uses to speak with that being, this figurative death, I think is encapsulating of what the comic is in a nutshell for us, and that kind of like sets the tone to the audience. Like, okay, if you're in with us after page 2, you know what you're going to get for the rest of the comic.
So what did he say to him, if you don't mind my asking?
Said, what the fuck are you staring at?
I'm waiting for you to give that good line reading, Mike. You're the actor of the two of us.
No, it's it actually feels kind of surreal. Like, but there's also, I think that particular scene why I'm also kind of clicks. We all come from our own mortality at some point, right? I think there's something very real about that. Just like, I'm still standing, even though there may be nobody here but you and me. What you doing here, buddy?
Yeah, that's a big theme for Grave Brigade, and going forward in the next 4 issues after this, a lot of that story will tie in. We're introducing the idea of Frankenstein and the legacy of Dr. Frankenstein's creation, and bringing life to something that doesn't have any life anymore, and that sort of thing. So it kind of all plays together. So yeah, perfect way to encapsulate the story in just 2 pages.
Nice. And so you're at issue 5 now.
Yes,
we're writing issue 5 or rewriting issue 5 to go with the artist now. So
then, how many more you got before you call this a story, or could you in theory go forever?
I mean, being that's dated, I don't know if we could go forever, but I think we have at least one more trade back in the works, another 5 issues, and we'll kind of see what feels good after that. We definitely, like, to touch on the conversation when we started the podcast, we don't want to drag it out to a point that is not entertaining or doesn't make sense. And, until we write more issues, we won't know how much the story really has left.
I think one of the unique things about what we've done with Grave Brigade too is by the end of issue 5, it'll feel like a complete story, but then we're also leaving the door open for us to do more if the audience wants more. So it'll be up to the audience in a way for us, but we've definitely got another bigger story to tell after that. But we're just trying to get to that 5th issue. That's our finish line right now, and we'll see how it goes after that. That'll get us to a collection that people can buy. So there's another thing of, there's collectors that like to read single issues, and there's collectors that like to read trade backs, and people want to get the whole book, sit down and read it in one sitting. Kind of like our conversation about binge watching TV in a way.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get to that collected issue. But because we've learned from Superbud as well, where in this indie market, it takes a long time to sometimes create a book and get it out there and produce it. Each issue of Grave Brigade is also going to feel like its own unique story. So each of the 5 issues is going to have its own setting. there's a unique adversary in them, and after reading 24 pages of any issue, you're going to feel like you got a complete story as well. If you want to read more of it, you can read more of it and get a bigger story, but you're not going to be left with, oh, this was just a section of a story or a part of a story. You're going to get a complete arc out of that.
Okay, so final 2 questions, and we'll call it a day. Well, the first one is, get to the 5th issue, right? Once 5th issue's done, say you don't continue, you both happy with it?
Yeah.
I think we're working through the rewrites now in issue 5, but what we've got, I think, sounds like a really solid ending, and will give us the catharsis that I think we need from the story, and hopefully it'll give that to the readers as well.
No, it's fair. I just thought I just figured I'd ask, because sometimes going back to what we said at the beginning, sometimes you say everything you need to say, and there's really nothing more to say in the story, and that's great. Like, that means there's a certain release with that. So
I think I also feel like, almost playing off what we were talking about with Star Wars, A New Hope is such a good movie, and like, as much as it leaves things open for telling the rest of that story, if that was the only Star Wars that existed, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, they never even like got their feet off the ground. I still would love it. And that's kind of how I feel about this first 5 issues. Like, I will be happy if, I want to keep telling these stories. I don't feel like that's all we have to tell, but I also will feel like we told a good story, and that we left like enough for somebody to like come back to and revisit and enjoy on a reread.
So does that mean then the second 5 books are The Empire Strikes Back?
Might be.
I think so, yeah.
So Frank's going to go to one of the characters, I'm your father. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Cuts his hand off too.
Oh,
The character gets frozen in carbonate.
that's right. That's
that'd be
right.
difficult.
But no, I mean, that's honestly a really good way to put it. Like that, like especially the original trilogy stands well on its own. You don't need to go anywhere else, and you get a great story. And honestly, that's what this is about. At the end of the day, is telling the best story you possibly can.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think we have an interview here, gentlemen. What do you guys think?
Awesome.
I quite enjoyed it. Thanks for going everywhere and anywhere.
That's really
good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we do. And I mean, I my joke is I talk about life, the universe, and everything. Once you get the reference there, then you get it. And to everybody else, that's the conversation. So, where can they find your books, guys?
Well, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say the most important place right now is Kickstarter for the next 8 days. You can get Grave Brigade there. And I think on the add-ons, you can also pick up the 3 issues of Superbud if you're interested in that.
Okay, so real quick, do you have the address to it?
Yeah. Send you.
Send me an all-important address. We're trained professionals, ladies and gentlemen.
We can do this quickly.
Yeah.
If the internet wants to work, there we go.
If the internet will make. I mean, you did beat up your computer to start, so it might be.
That is
It
true.
survived. I dropped it, but it survived.
I think I found it. I think I found
You're
it.
probably faster than I was.
I would like to pretend I'm good. Let's see if I got it right. Hold on a second here.
I also just shared it.
Yeah. Is that it? Is that it?
I believe so.
Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a train. They gave me an award for this, guys. They gave me an award.
Well, now I can see why.
Yeah, I'm almost good. I'm almost good at the job. Just don't tell anybody, okay? Okay, keep it a secret.
Secret safe with me.
We're gonna tell everybody.
Oh, darn it!
This is on the internet, right? Nobody can find that.
No, it's nobody, nada. So why don't you give the pitch here again, guys, just for everybody here, so we'll wrap this up, and then how can I find you gentlemen also at the end here?
So the elevator pitch is World War II soldiers, basically the Dirty Dozen, fighting the monsters created by Nazis to hopefully win the war and protect mankind.
Nice. and so that big stakes and this is the first issue, or is there more?
This is issue 1, yeah.
This is the first one for the series. Okay, so you guys are well ahead then.
Well, yeah, like Tim said, we had already been working on the project for a while, but during quarantine, we really pushed ourselves to get as many issues as we could ready to go to the artist.
So this won't be the last. I'm sorry I'm doing this, but this just because what we're talking about, we're talking 3-4 issues in. It's just like, okay, so will this be the last Kickstarter for Grave Brigade this year?
Probably this year, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I think we're planning for hopefully February or March to do issue 2.
Okay. No, it's cool. I just thought I'd ask because if you're this far ahead, I mean, honestly, kudos to you both in one sense, because I mean, that means you got a plan, and that sounds good. So
yeah, and we'll tie up. We're gonna do some rewrites and lettering and things, but we've got all the line art and the colors done, which is awesome.
So I mean, so you're really ahead. All right, so everybody check out Grave Brigade issue 1. If you like your Dirty Dozen, you like old school horror, you like World War II, this book is for you. They almost rhymed. Damn. So how can people if people want to just find you guys, is there a way they can find you?
Absolutely. I'm all things Mike Dean on that's my website as well as my Instagram, and that's pretty much it.
So that's you. Hold on a second here. I got that right.
All things Mike Dean.
All things Mike Dean. Okay. See, I'm not quite that good. See.
And I really only use Instagram for social media, so I am at Tim Rad Writes.
Got it.
Woohoo! So Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram. Yeah.
Tim Rad Writes.
Tim Rad Writes. Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second here. Oh,
there you go.
I'm a trained professional. Almost. Thank you very much, Nolan. And before we wrap this bad boy up, I have Joshing is about to break 1,000 episodes, and I've already started to do the show. Where it's going to be like post 1,000. You can check out my Patreon right now. You can see shows already. And the novel I talked about earlier, Corey the Night Witch, you can actually start reading chapters of it right now. $5 gets you access to all of this stuff. You should have to check that out now. Once again, I want to thank both Mike and Tim to come on the show. Check out their Kickstarter right now. It's available right as we speak. Go check that out. Check them out. They're amazing people. And that will do it today, folks. Tomorrow I get to talk murder with Anita Stewart. She's my guest tomorrow. That'll be a fun one. So for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for having us.